What's up YouTube? Today we're going to talk about 5 interesting uses for the new Kilohearts plugins. So that's dual delay and channel mixer. Let's dive in and have a look. So firstly, I want to talk about channel mixer, which is a very simple yet incredibly useful tool. What it can be used for is a couple of different tasks, from phase cancelling to mid-side split and all sorts of things like that. In fact, there are various different presets built into channel mixer with various different utility things. So what this is very useful for is stuff like mid-side split and then processing with external channels. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to use this within the Kilohearts ecosystem. So say, for example, if we have a plugin that deals with left and right signals individually, like, you know, some of the old school compressors and stuff like that. I know the Shadow Hills mastering thing that Plugin Alliance released not so long ago for free. Then they had a paid version, which was a mid-side option. So the channel mixer allows you to actually put any plugin into mid-side and basically swap between processing the left and the right channels and processing the side, the mid and the side channels on those same signals instead. So let me outline exactly what I'm talking about. So I've put together a quick stereo distortion here in the effects grid in Bitwig, and what this does is basically it's got a drive, it's got a saturator and a folder. I guess I should probably name these. And then basically the same thing, but then on the right hand side channel. So now what happens if we want to actually process these, instead of on the left and the right channel, on the mids channel and the sides channel? Particularly with drums, it's nice to actually put just saturation or distortion on your mids channel, but leave your side channels clean, because often that's where like the reverbs and stuff are, and you often don't want to add too much distortion and saturation to the reverbs, because that's what muddies the sound up. You know, just distortion on the transients can actually make it sound a lot more powerful and a lot louder. So let's use the channel mixer before and after. And here what we're going to want to do is, on this one, let's set this to mid-side decode. And then let's duplicate this and switch the patch over to mid-side encode. So it actually, I figured out, doesn't matter which side is which. It would just change which side here is mid and side. Does that make sense? So check out what happens now when we process, or when we adjust these, what was left and right distortions. Okay, so tip number 2 is using the channel mixers in parallel mode within the same snap heap. We can set up a similar thing like we did with the distorting just the mids channel of the drums, but we can do it all within a single snap heap. So let's open up snap heap over here. So what we want to do is we want to set this to parallel mode over here by pressing this button. And then what we can do is we can add a channel mixer here and a channel mixer here. And on these, we want to choose the presets mid only and side only. So now we're going to have just the mids in one channel and just the sides in another channel. So here, for example, we could add a distortion. now because we've got them in a single instance, we can actually get quite experimental with what we want to do with the sound. So for example, we could add like a filter or a slice EQ like before the distortion, so we can boost up certain ranges. Like, so you heard there was like a little bit of boominess in that distortion. We can carve that out a little bit with the slice EQ, boost up a bit of mid-range to get the snare to kind of slap a little bit harder in the distortion. What we can also do is an interesting trick is to add reverb into the sides channel, because then what you can do is you can kind of create more sides. Does that make sense? We can even go further and add something like a harsh to further spread the stereo spectrum. Often when I'm using reverb on the sides channel, I want to use a audio follower to duck the mix of the reverb, just so you don't hear it on the transient of the sound. Does that make sense? And of course, because of the global mix parameter, we can actually just mix in the amount of this kind of weird sound designy stereo effect that we've created. So we could actually even just mix in a minuscule amount of it, so that it's not really kind of too brutal like we've got here, but it kind of still adds a little bit of that excitement and depth to the sound. Okay, tip number 3, I want to start incorporating the new delay. So, I want to talk about how we could create a sound with the delay, and then use the mid side to be able to process them individually, like the different delay splits, to be able to process the left and right channels of these delay tails individually. So, what we're going to want to do is, let's create the dual delay over here. So what we're going to want to do here is set the mix to 100%, and we're going to use the global mix as our kind of delay mix. Reason being is because we want the full tails to come out of here, and then we can process the kind of full dry tails of the sound, which we then use the global mix to mix back in again. I hope you guys are following. So here what we're going to do is set this to parallel mode, and then we're going to put in 2 channel mixes over here, and then we can just duplicate it, and then let's open up the preset. This one, let's say use mono from left, and this one we use mono from right. And then what we want to do is we want to pan this one left and pan this one right. Are you guys following? Okay, so once we've got it set up like this, what we can start doing is we can start adding individual effects to each of these layers. So you can go wild here. You don't necessarily have to use the ones that I'm using, but these are nice combinations that I've found work really well. So one thing to note as well about the dual delay is it is actually quite significantly different to the regular delay. When you modulate the milliseconds, it is not quite as glitchy as the traditional delay. It's actually much cleaner. So you can actually use this to your advantage, which you're going to get to a little bit later on with a bit more of an experimental technique. But that's just one thing to note, is that we can actually get a bit more experimental with this without having to worry about it glitching up the sound too much in terms of modulating the delay times. So what we can do is we can actually add a random, and let's modulate the time and the offset between left and right. and then maybe the crosstalk as well. So what the crosstalk is, it's basically how much of the left gets fed into the right and vice versa. So you can actually get some really nice effects, almost kind of granular-like effects by modulating these three, and then just having different effects on the left and right channels. So let's just play around a little bit with these. How sick is that, hey? I'm actually going to save this preset for my Patreons. So what I also want to do is I want to slap in a quick preset here from a video that I did a couple of weeks ago, the top 50 tricks for Faceplant. I'm sure you saw that video. It's also, the same preset is also in, well, not exactly the same, it's a bit more fine-tuned. Is in my latest Catalyst Snap Heap preset pack. I'll remember to post the links to that in the description. It's just a basic shimmer reverb. So in combination with this effect, beautiful granular-like sounds. Now, of course, what we can do is we can actually set up a macro to control all of this random chaosness over here. And we can also set up a macro to control the amount of kind of extra shimmer on top, so we can kind of play the sound to fit into the context a little bit better. Okay, tip number 4 has to do with just the channel mixer and how you can actually use it as a phase wobbler. Let's call it that. For lack of a better explanation, you know, with these kind of heavy Reese bass lines, we often use an EQ to actually offset the phase before a distortion to actually give it that kind of like wobble. You can actually do a very similar thing with just the channel mixer and a bit of modulation, because the channel mixer actually allows you to phase cancel the channels. But it's interesting because it gives you a variable amount of phase cancellation. So I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let's say, for example, just add a quick detuned unison saw like this. So with this, there's already a fair amount of cancellation or phasing happening because of the detuning. But you can actually offset that a little bit by just spreading it in the stereo. But we don't want to spread it all the way because we still want a bit of that to be able to play with. You guys follow? So here, let's just put in a distortion. Let's go with Faturator. And I'm also going to put in a transient shaper and make use of the clip. So what I'll do is I'll gain before and after it. Okay, so let's open up the snap heap and let's put in the channel mixer over here. So if we just modulate this with our hands, like manually, if we just modulate this manually, you'll notice that we already have that kind of phasing happening. So like I said, because it's variable degrees, we can actually put randomizers here and actually just use the randomization of these parameters, this phase, in and out to create like these almost neuro-y kind of offsets in the phase of the sound before that distortion. So if we dial it in just a small amount, you can still kind of maintain that movement, but it's just not as drastic. Okay, so I actually want to put in a clean sine layer at the bottom here. And then once we've set it up with the randoms and everything, we can just hold control and drag the snap heaps to just duplicate it. And then each of them will have their own randomization parameter. Okay, last one. So I've got a snare that I've created here that I've loaded up in FazePlant. Remember what I was saying about the dual delay being significantly cleaner than the traditional delay, specifically when you modulate the time of the delay. So this is really interesting in situations like physical modeling, because we could potentially use something like an audio follower to modulate the delay times, and this creates a particularly string-like sound that I've only really been able to achieve with comb filters. But the problem is the comb filters in FazePlant require a bit of setup, like I've explained in that video which I outlined a little bit earlier. So this is really interesting for creating these weird wonky string sounds. This is purely experimental. It might not end in anything super musical, but I'm sure some of those more sound designy folks are going to get something interesting out of this. So let's just have a listen to what's happening to the snare with the dual delay on it tuned to the lowest time. We're going to want to tune the feedback up a little bit as well. So here I'm turning up the stereo multiplier by 0.2 so that it's very plucky. You hear that? It's almost like a string type of effect, and we can turn the feedback up even more to get it to resonate. Then the crosstalk would be, again, like the feedback between the two channels. You hear how it creates almost an unstable kind of sound when that's full. So the crosstalk you can use to almost model like inharmonicities, but anyway, that's beside the point. What we want to do is we actually want to modulate the delay time. Can you hear that weird metallic effect now? It's like a string wobble, and it's because the time of the delay has that kind of modulation on it, going from really high to a bit lower. We can further mess it up a little bit by creating a new audio follower, which we can kind of choose a different release time and stuff. And then here, what we can do is we can use this to change the delay multiplier and the crosstalk. That's going to give us more of a organic type of sound, I guess. And then we can fine tune these settings, like I said. Okay, so once we've dialed in like the tone, then I dial the feedback down a bit, and we can kind of start mixing it back into the original sound. Or we could combine it with that previous effect I was talking about. Remember about, you know, stacking it up and affecting the left-right channels individually to create that granular type of thing, to really create some weird tones out of just the snare drum. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to be uploading a bunch of these presets to my Patreon for my $5 supporters. If you want to know what that's all about, check out the link in the description. Again, going to quickly shout out the pack that I just released for Snapheap that is on my store. You can check out the links in the description as well. And also the long video, which I just put out with a bunch of techniques in for Snapheap, Kilohearts stuff, for Snapheap, Faceplant, and Multipass. Anyway, see you guys next time. Have a good one. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers. Oh, one thing. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe button. See you guys next time. Cheers.